I think we're live.
Action.
Hi. Action.
Battle stations.
Battle stations, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Tonight we're going to talk about some of the new spring releases here at Tinhorn Creek. And my name is Terry Myerstone. I look after our direct-to-consumer and wine club. I think there's a few wine club members that are there.
And webinar.
And sort of webinars, yeah. And
I'm Andrew Windsor. I'm the winemaker here. I was part of the last webinar, so if you've been tuning in, you've met me before.
we can never get enough of you, though, Andrew. How can we get enough?
I'm the only one
Andrew?
that volunteers, essentially.
So we wanted to chat a little bit about some of the new wines that have just come out. They're just being released. Some of you may have your club case already, so you could sip along if you wanted to open one bottle, or you can
Or
write
six.
notes. Or six,
As
like we did.
As we're going to do.
That's right. So we have 3 whites and 3 reds.
2 whites, 1 rosé, 3 reds.
I stand corrected. Okay. The
Mhm.
semantics.
Got to
Yeah.
be technical when it's the winemaker on the show.
Okay. So
Correct.
before we go wine by wine, maybe an overview of
the
these.
vintage,
Yeah, this vintage.
Good call. I mean, the first 3 wines are all going to be from the 2015 vintage, the most current one.
Yeah.
If you've been keeping tabs. So very hot vintage, by far the earliest and hottest vintage on record. Probably not total degree growing days, which is sort of a calculation of how hot every day is from essentially the time we have grapes to the time we pick them. But incredibly hot spring, incredibly hot summer. When we picked our Pinot Gris, I think it was the 23rd of August, which is at least 10 days earlier than anything here historically. And at Tinhorn Creek, that's 20 years. So that's a pretty good stretch, showing essentially how hot the year was. So when we look at the first 3 wines, white wines and rosés, technically it was a difficult vintage from a winemaking perspective, because your picking window is very narrow. You really only have, pardon me, 2 or 3 days to sort of get the picks right. Whereas in 14, which was also quite warm early on, but when it came to the fall, it was a little bit cooler. We were able to pick some of these varieties over the course of 3 to 4 weeks as opposed to 3 to 4 days. So all in all, the 15 vintage was quite warm. Moving into some of the reds that we'll be looking at, we've got the 2012 Oldfield Series Pinot Noir, which was a nice sort of return to warmer vintages. I would say 2012 was probably your typical average vintage in the Okanagan. And if you were a Crush Club member, you would have been seeing the 10s and the 11s come through prior to this release. Very cold vintages. In fact, 11 was the coldest one on record. So 12 is a nice return to a bit more typical Tinhorn wines. And then I think we go into the 13 Cab Franc and the 14 Merlot.
Right.
Again, 13 Cab Franc being similar to the 12 and being a bit more typical. 14 being like 15, much warmer. But for me, the 14 vintage is looking like it could be one of the best vintages in the Okanagan ever. Still a bit early for the 15s. They're all still in barrel, so time will tell. But snapshot of the vintages, which we have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them here for you. So
It'd be fun to see. Yes. All right. So where are we starting with first?
I like to start with the Pinot Gris.
Okay.
This is a 2015 Pinot Gris.
Ready?
You're all set?
I'm set.
So Pinot Gris is the most planted white grape variety that we have. There it is for everyone. I have to hold it still for about 10 minutes, I think.
I don't know if you can ever really see it
Have
there,
that
but
focus cam. It'll fly. Pardon me. So the Pinot Gris, again, like I said, we picked it quite early. And really we're trying to aim for a really balanced wine in 2015, which I knew was going to be a challenge with it being as warm as it was. So
what are the challenges? So acidity, keeping acidity,
well,
or
being in the South
just the right
Okanagan, it
time?
is quite hot. We have 2 very distinct vineyard sites for Pinot Gris. Obviously, the Golden Mile Bench which is much cooler than the Black Sage bench. And so it was the Black Sage portion that we picked in late August. Golden Mile bench, we had a little bit of flexibility, picked it over the first sort of 3-4 days into September, but even still not a lot of flexibility in terms of harvest time. So you never want Pinot Gris to be super ripe unless you're going to go for essentially an Alsatian style where you can give it 2 or 3 years of maturation prior to releasing it.
Mm-hmm.
Our style has always been sort of a bit more pretty, a bit more feminine and aromatic. And so you want the alcohols to be lower and you want the wine to be more fresh. And so that's essentially why we kind of got out front and started picking quite early. I think we were probably one of the first people to be picking in the South Okanagan, Pinot Gris in particular. But this wine is still, it's still 13% alcohol, so it's not shy. It's got a lot of fruit intensity, but it's still very, very young. Anyone that's in the Crush Club that got these wines now, I would say this one's probably the most drinkable at this point.
So theirs might be gone already? Is that?
Well, it's possible.
Oh, got it. It's gone. That's delicious. Yeah.
But I mean, the aromatic profile is very similar to the 14. It just seems to be a bit more citrus driven and a bit more focused.
Yeah. Now there's no oak on this.
None at all.
No,
we do stainless steel barrel ferments. And then we also do some large format stainless steel tank ferments. Some of them we do with natural yeast, some of them we do with selected yeasts, and then they all kind of come together in the same pot in the end, and it gives it a bit more texture, a bit more complexity, but it all has that freshness of stainless steel that we try to achieve.
We always get asked about cellaring, so how would you go with this one?
It all depends on sort of people's tolerance for aged characteristics in wine. For me, you're going to always see a white wine in particular kind of come out really fresh and be quite drinkable within the first 18 months or so. Some might go to 24 months and still look quite drinkable. And then they kind of go into a bit of a lull phase where the fruit tapers off. It's no longer really fresh, lively, fruity drinking wine. And it doesn't really seem to have much complexity there. And they kind of tend to, like I said, they kind of lull a little bit. But then, you pull it out of the cellar 24 months after that, then you start getting some more complexity, a bit more age characteristic. But again, that's not for everyone. You're not going to have this bright sort of orchard fruit,
delicious,
citrus-driven flavor profiles that you have in a young wine. It becomes more honeyed and more textured, and they're completely different wines.
This won't be past my house, like, I don't know,
No,
the end of May.
Most people don't hold on to Pinot Gris that long.
No,
I can't blame them. This is a summer wine, as is the rosé that we'll try in a little bit.
No, that's delicious.
They're meant to be drunk. But they can go the distance. It's just
well, we did have some library wines in February that we released with the club, and there were some Pinot Gris. I think the oldest we had was 2010.
Yep.
And it was spectacular.
Totally.
It was spectacular. Not the same as this.
Yeah.
But it was that honeyed, more
like marmalade flavors and things like that. And that's if you drink one every month, you're gonna find a point where they just essentially stop delivering. Give it another year before you even open another one. And don't keep hoping that it's gonna come back. Then after that year, you'll be surprised by
it's kind of like teenagers, right? They kind of go stupid and then they wake up.
I don't have kids, but based on what my mom told me, I think that's the truth.
It's a lot like that. What did Irma Bombeck say? Bury them when they're 12, dig them up when they're 19.
My mom was not a big fan of mine between the ages of 14 to 20.
Yes. So we've had a question come in from Sam asking, what's the difference between Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio?
The never-ending Gris to Grigio question. Terry, did you want to take this one?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, I think it's all you.
So Gris and Grigio are essentially the same word. One's Italian, one is French, and they are also, the wines are done, one being French and one being Italian. stylistically, the wines are very different, but they both refer to the exact same grape.
So stylistically,
Well, stylistically, Pinot Gris, the French one, which would be predominantly from Alsace, which is northeastern France and the border with Germany. Those are sort of those rich wines that I was referring to before, aged typically in large barrels, and typically much more ripe and full-bodied in style, probably 2 years old at release at least.
Yeah.
This wine is not even 6 months, put into that perspective. Pinot Grigio comes from northern Italy, typically from the northwest all the way to the eastern border with Slovenia and Croatia. Typically made in a lighter style. They're usually warmer sites, but they pick them earlier and go for a fresh, more aromatic white style, which is very much the case with most Italian whites.
Yeah.
They tend to be a bit more fresh and lively and acid driven and not such rich, unctuous style. So the cool thing about the Okanagan is our Pinot Gris kind of straddles the middle. They're a bit more weighted than a Grigio Italian style Pinot Gris. They've got way more fruit intensity, way more lushness to them, but they're typically made younger and not designed to be a rich, unctuous white wine that's meant to go with essentially bacon for every meal, bacon and
maple
pierogies
sugar,
and
so
else?
we need a new Canadian name like Pinot Grit or
Pinot Gris.
Gray, Pinot Gray.
Doesn't have the same ring, Terry.
No, it doesn't. Okay, never mind. I'm not in the branding department. Yeah.
We're not marketers. So.
No, just a drinker. Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time for Gewürztraminer.
Yeah. Well,
Come up with Pinot Gris.
Pinot Gris. And goodness knows what we could do with Gewürztraminer.
Oh yes.
Right? Yeah.
So my mom,
Yeah.
my mom loves this wine, but she can never pronounce it, which is always embarrassing for a winemaker.
That's right. This is a hard one to pronounce. A lot of people say, "How do you say it?" And I just say goo. Oh, I love the goo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goo is an easy
say
way.
Or Gewürz.
You essentially eliminate, 3/4 of the word. But Gewürztraminer is essentially means spicy Traminer in German.
Yeah.
Fabulous grape variety. And when you smell this wine, if you've never had a Gewürztraminer before, you can smell it. It smells spicy.
Yeah.
Very tropical. This wine last year was very much a surprise wine for me. It turned out to be excellent.
It was gold medal winner, Wine-A-Line.
Yeah,
just about anything it went into.
And this
right?
wine, I think, is pretty much right along the same vein. It's got the same unctuous, fruity, richness to it. Very tropical, drinking really, really well out of the gate as well. But has the potential to go a few years for sure.
Yeah.
What do you taste, Terry?
Elderberry. No. I have a few descriptives. Yummy is one.
Yummy.
Yummy is one.
Yeah.
But this is really honeyed. Like it's a beautiful mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
It's got those aromatics. It's just absolutely scrumptious. Yeah, I wish we had smell-o-vision that we could just send this on. And a lot of people won't try a Gewürztraminer. They'll go, "Oh no, I don't drink it. It's too sweet," or they have bad memories of like Blue Nun or Riefvermilch or something like that, right? But I just say just try it, and especially try it with some spicy foods or even blue cheese or sweet vinaigrette. It's on a salad.
Bacon and pierogies.
Bacon and pierogies. We have a theme going here.
Well,
bacon and pierogies.
So these wines that are made in this sort of off-dry, rich style, they really suit German food. Like, and that's the places that they call home essentially, which I think the Golden Mile Bench is a good home for them too. But the native food to Alsace and to southern Germany is lots of pork, lots of sauerkraut, lots of really rich, salty foods. And these wines really, really go well with them. Here in North America, curries and spicy things and anything that's really sort of intensely flavored these are really good wines to go with them because they sort of have the same intensity.
I love this one on a patio with cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Or even without,
pate
on the patio. Meant to be. Yeah. No, this one, and this was probably our number one choice in the tasting room over the summer last year when people were coming in. It was just Yeah, it's a real favorite. So I think this one's going to be another big favorite.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's probably
Yeah.
not quite as ready to go as the Gewürztraminer. Maybe say 2-3 months from now, it'll kind of round out a little bit. It was only bottled, 8 weeks ago, so it's.
But
still
this
needs a
this
little bit of
with the acidity, it could age, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
the last two vintages made in the style that they're a bit more rich. We talked about Pinot Gris going, 3 to 5 years. This wine, 5 to 10 years, I think wouldn't be, shooting too far. I think
It'll be interesting to try one every year and just keep notes on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have to do that.
Plus, if my kids don't come over, because he'll be gone.
Yeah.
He'll just wipe it out. That's
But yeah, and for me, the aromas are very similar to the 14. They got a lot of lychee, just a little bit of rose, but there's some peachiness too, and
not as much rose as maybe the
not as
14.
much rose, more
No.
ginger, like sort of
Yeah.
candied ginger.
Yeah.
And I find the balance of this one to be a little bit more refined. I think the 14 was very lush.
Yeah.
And very rich. This one seems a bit tighter. It is still very young though, so it's got time to improve and gain some.
Yeah. Because these have just been released beginning of May, so.
You're in the tasting room.
No, actually to club members, that's right.
Just the club members.
Just the club
The
members
only ones
have
that have
them.
these yet.
But pretty soon the 14, which was brilliant, will be out, and then people get the 15.
Yeah.
Or they could join the Crush Club.
Or they could join the Crush
Or they
Club.
could join the Crush Club.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, those are so good. All right, now
Good
what?
start.
No.
Well, the crowd pleaser rosé, I think, is what we have next to deal with.
First of all, look at the color of this. I don't know if you can see. Can you see how beautiful this color is? I don't know. If
Put
you
just
see.
a little bit closer, I think, Terry. Ooh.
Ooh, can you reach?
Is that close?
Yeah.
Closer?
So how long?
Yes.
How long is that on the skins to get that color?
I sort of started looking at it after about 12 hours.
Yeah.
You
What?
know what?
What?
I think we have to do the poll first because
Let's do the poll first.
because
Oh.
the poll
Ooh.
has. I can't
Oh,
talk
you
about
don't
this
want to
wine.
talk about this yet.
Can't
You
talk
don't
about
want
that
to give
wine
it
too.
away.
We can have some though.
All right.
We can have some while the poll goes down.
You guys do all the work, and we're gonna
All
have
right.
a look. Okay.
So the poll is: in what style is our rosé made? Saguenay? Did I pronounce that right?
Close, Seigneur.
Sangye?
So close. Or blending of red and white wine, or direct pressing of red grapes.
And
Talk amongst
the
yourselves.
Jeopardy theme.
Okay, I'm just pouring rosé.
So historically, I'm not sure how. I think it's been made a few different ways here.
Don't give the answer.
Over
though.
the years.
No.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
in the last 2 years, it's been made in one style. Can you guys figure it out?
All right. So I'm just waiting for a few more answers to come
Yeah.
through because, we'll just see.
Yeah. They're
So-
waiting to see if Andrew
I know,
gives
if he
a
slips
tip.
up.
They're having that I
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
few mistakes. Well,
Yeah.
we can certainly talk about the wine too.
Well, right
Two,
now I'll
three.
tell you where we're at. We're
Okay.
at 71% for direct pressing of red
Right.
grapes, and then 29% of the word I butchered completely.
Sangye?
Seigneur.
Sangye? Okay.
Interesting. So it is again, as in 14, the 15 is 100% Cab Franc.
Okay.
Comes 100% from our Diamondback vineyard on the Black Sage bench. Are we ready to do the reveal?
Yeah, we'll end the poll now. But right now we're at 33% for Sangye, 11% for blending of red and white wine,
Yep.
and 56% of direct pressing of red grapes.
Nicely done. So
And the answer is?
direct to press. So what we do is we machine harvest them really early in the morning, usually about 3 or 4 o'clock, depends on when the harvest machine driver wakes up, because that time of the year he's working 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so we bring them directly to the winery, we leave them in bins, typically put them in the shade or in the barrel cellar here, and we just leave them alone. We're working, 12 to 14 to 16-hour days ourselves at harvest. So as soon as they come in, we have a quick look to make sure that the fruit is clean, which, the years I've been here, and I think probably 18 of the 20 years that Tinhorn's been around, it's been pretty pristine fruit. So no issues leaving the grapes as is, no sulfur, no nothing, no additives. You just leave it in the bin, and then after about 12 hours, we come and have a look and make sure that it's extracted enough color. That's essentially the only indicator that I use for when to press the grapes. And then after about 12 hours, 12 hours, we kind of say, okay, let's start loading the press. That takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on what the press is doing prior. And then, goes straight to the press.
So is it a softer press than you would do, just so you don't extract too much color?
No. It's about the same as the Gris and the Gewürztraminer. Very long, slow press programs, sort of very gentle extraction, but they end up very end with higher pressure than I would say the Chardonnays and the Sauvignon Blancs.
Okay, I would have thought reverse. Yeah.
Well, because the color is that delicate, it's the harder squeezing. Still not really that hard. Talking about maybe 0.8 barometric pressure, which for most people doesn't mean anything, but not about less than half of what the press will do, essentially. Okay. And so still very gentle, but harder than some other varieties. And so that gives you a really nice color. And for me, rosé is very much a visual experience. Yeah. Flavors are important as well, but usually the prettiest one on the shelf wins the day. And then if it tastes good, then people will go back to it. But I think
that is like strawberries.
Right now, when it's really young like this, the 14 tasted very much like this as well. Yeah. Essentially strawberry jam, fresh strawberries, a little bit of cream on there. It's very, very fruity right now. This wine is slightly drier than the 14. Yeah. But right now nobody would agree to that comment because it is so fruity. Yeah. For me, I'm drinking it now every weekend, but for me, this wine will probably hit its stride come July. The fruitiness kind of drops out a little bit. The savory side of Cab Franc comes through. Yeah. You start seeing a bit more spice and a bit more complexity in the wine, and it's like this is just blood orange, strawberry, super fresh, super luscious. Yeah, I mean, it's tasty, but
I just had my last bottle of the 14 about a week ago, and it was spectacular.
Yeah, it's still.
And then I said, what I'm sure everybody at home says, why didn't I save more of these? But I don't know how I could have.
Well, we sold out in 3 months, so
I think we're going to do the same too. When I look at what we've got, don't delay on this one because I think it'll be gone by the end of June.
Yes.
I think everybody here, we're all going, I better get my case now.
Yeah.
It'll be gone.
Yeah. We do about 830 cases, so it's not a lot, but I think if any wine that we make of that quantity, it sells at lightning speed. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a question?
Just my own question, actually. Do you think that rosé is gaining in popularity again after kind of getting away from the whole entire White Zinfandel trend?
I just make one. I'm not really a marketer.
The answer is yes. Think rosé revolution.
I drink more rosé now than ever. If that helps.
There's a statistic last year that in France they doubled their exports of rosé. Yeah, so it was up by 50% what they were sending. Trend is in the U.S. as well. Rosé is like hugely increased in what it's doing.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of always been surprising to me that rosé and sparkling wine in North America in general, more in Canada, it just doesn't. It never really had that much traction through the 90s and early 2000s, and you go anywhere else.
Were you here for Baby Duck? No.
I had to make
that could. You made Baby Duck?
Well, I didn't, but I had to supervise it back at Peller. Yeah, it still exists.
Wow.
Yeah, it still exists.
I don't want to comment on
that. Might have colored.
I still have friends that work over there. We'll leave it at that.
It's a good starter, rosé. Yeah, there you go.
That's a red wine, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's essentially sparkling red.
It's just
to me, it's a sparkling red.
That's not sparkling.
Let's move on.
We'll move on from Baby Duck. Yeah. This has come a long way.
Canadian consumers moved on from Baby Duck, so I think we can move on from Baby Duck. But when you go to south of France, when you go anywhere where it's hot, I mean, the Okanagan, it's essentially hot often. I mean, it has been really hot all April, all March, in the opposite order.
So Stuart doesn't want you to forget, Terry, don't forget Black Tower.
Oh, yeah.
But that's Riesling. Isn't that a
No,
Riesling?
that was
German.
Gewürztraminer,
Was it
wasn't it?
Gewürztraminer?
Wasn't
Well,
it?
you
Or
mentioned,
maybe
you mentioned
Black
Liebenfrau milk.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm dating myself actually really bad.
You know what? I
Yeah.
started drinking wine when
Yeah.
I was like, too. So
Yeah, okay. I don't feel too bad.
Liebenfrau milk, Black Tower, and then what was the other
Blue
one?
Nun.
Blue Nun.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I have another question
The
from
trifecta.
Carol.
Thanks,
Germany.
Stuart. Yeah, thanks a lot,
Going,
Stuart.
how do I ensure a rosé isn't too sweet? Grape.
Try it first. It's really the
Yeah.
only way. There's no. I mean, it depends on where is she living. Is she in Ontario? Probably not.
She's in Alberta, right? I think. Carol?
Talk to the store owner or somebody that actually has some idea what the wine, if they've at least tried it. And they can kind of give you a legitimate range of what is sweet and what isn't.
Yeah.
You know, they're probably still going to tell you a wine that is sweet isn't that sweet. So err on the side of looking for something dry. If you don't like sweet rosé, tell them you want a dry rosé.
Does color make any difference?
No,
No.
not usually.
Not
I
usually?
think
Yeah.
too much if I said there was an association, but there's
Yeah.
certain varieties and certain styles, like white Zinfandels. They tend to be a bit more purpley than sort of amethyst,
Yeah.
or I don't know what you would call that,
Light coral
light
or something.
coral. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So going on to Carol's question, I actually have a question about that because in places like the BCLDB and in Alberta liquor stores or anywhere else, they tend to still use like the 0, 1,
Right.
2. They still use the number
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
Is that something that a consumer who wouldn't really know still be able to use?
Yes, absolutely. I think.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're looking for something dry, you always want 0 because from my understanding, and it's different from province to province, but a 1 in Ontario would be 10 grams of sugar. I think from 10 to 20 grams. So that is a significant range on its own right.
Right.
And anything above 10 grams is not dry.
Yeah.
In fact, anything above 3 grams is not dry. This 2015 rosé is 6.5 grams. So it's not bone dry, but it's not sweet either. But if you like the 14, it was around 9 grams. So this is a bit
A little
more
bit
dry,
dry.
but it doesn't seem like it right now because it is so
No,
fruity.
So fruity.
Mhm.
So it's your perception in sweetness and flavors is kind of always got to be in tune with how fruity a wine is just naturally.
Yeah. It's great as it sits and opens. It's like, yeah.
That's really nice. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. We can pour you a glass.
We might stick
can
with
pour
this
you a
wine.
glass.
Is there any more questions while we drink our rosé?
No,
That's right.
Carol just said that she's in Banff. She's visiting Strathmore and not a lot of rosé choice in Strathmore, I guess.
It's
So.
because it's
Yeah.
cold in Banff. And you've got 1 month of summer, so there's probably not a lot of rosé options there.
No,
Come to the
just drink.
Okanagan. It's about
Yeah.
25 degrees warmer here, and we have rosé everywhere. It's delicious.
Now, there were some accidental rosés that happened in, say, 2011, where it was super cold. Things didn't get right.
I was in
But
New
those
Zealand
are-
and France, and it was really good vintages
Yeah,
down there.
okay. But we won't go down that road.
No,
No,
no.
we won't go down that road. All right. This is an on-purpose rosé.
Yeah,
That
oh,
was
absolutely.
that is delicious.
Well, we've been
That's
making
delicious.
rosé here for 5 consecutive vintages?
So this is your second vintage,
Yes,
right? With this,
made exactly the same way.
exactly the same way.
The first one was really good, so I figured.
Yeah. It
Don't
was
change
really
it.
good. Why? Now, are we going into the reds? Or are we doing
We are
another
going
poll?
to the reds now.
All right, let's do
Yeah,
the
well,
reds.
we just we did our first poll, so
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You know what? Before we do this,
Okay.
can we mention 2 wines from a previous vintage before we move to our reds that just won prestigious awards at the Okanagan Wine Festival, and they were both
Does this
chosen.
one have an award on it or no?
It doesn't have the medal on it. We just grabbed it from the shelf. But the 2012 Bullfield Series Merlot and the 2013 Cabernet Franc were both picked best in BC,
Yes,
which is for their variety. So
Which is, I think, the
That's
first
pretty
time
cool.
we've won those awards.
yeah,
To my knowledge.
Yeah.
it was quite a surprise for
Yeah.
Kate and I when we were there to accept it.
Yes.
So it was fun.
Thank
Yeah.
you and Kate
Yeah.
for attending.
yeah. So those
So,
are
yeah.
flying off the shelf too. So
Absolutely.
There you go.
And, well, I mean, they are, I hate to say we've got stronger varieties than others, but Tinhorn's kind of always been known for their Bordeaux
Yeah.
reds. So it's not really any surprise to me that those two won. And again, it's very solid vintages.
Right.
Um,
So now we're moving a 2012 Pinot Noir, which is coming out in 2016. So that's like 4 years. What's been going on for 4 years? This is the Reserve Oldfield Series Pinot Noir.
4 years for me personally, or for wine?
Yeah, somebody's been doing it for 4 years, Andrew.
2 years here at Tin Horn. 2 years prior to that, I can't remember. But this wine, both of our Pinot Noirs see extensive aging.
Yeah.
The Oldfield series is at least 12 months in barrel, sometimes longer, and then up to 2.5 to 3 years in bottle. And those wines, Pinot Noir, everyone's always kind of looking for complexity in Pinot.
Mm-hmm.
And wines need to have some age to really start showing that complexity and show the terroir. And these are very cool. Our Pinots are really sort of underrated, I think, as are any Pinots from sort of the south end of the valley. I mean, a lot of people find it or think it's going to be too hot down here to grow good Pinot Noir, but there's lots of really good sites. And I find they all have, not only ours, but lots of other Pinots that I've seen, they all have a very unique flavor profile that doesn't exist further north from here.
Right.
And to me, it's always that sort of like I always do this really
cherry?
cool. No, to me it's like a bitter orange,
Really?
aromatic. Like, my dad used to drink this beverage when I was a kid called Brio Ginotto, which is like a soft drink from Italy, and it actually had like green, white, and red stripes on the can, like very, very Italian. And my dad's not Italian. But Brio Ginotto is a bitter orange that they grow in Italy and Mediterranean climates all over, and it's very commonly used as a bitter for other drinks. Something like Campari.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm getting that yet, but I probably don't have as.
I see it in every
Really?
few vintages of these wines in the 2 years I've been here, and I always kind of see that. This one, it's less obvious because it's riper vintage, a bit more cherry.
Okay, on the palate, I get it.
Yeah.
But I would never have got that unless you'd mentioned that.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I mean, not
So
everyone
now I'm
had
gonna
that
use
drink
that.
before.
Yeah.
But if you like Campari and you like bitters, like Italian bitters that are, very common, like the Milan area, they all have that as an ingredient. And I find it very cool. And our Pinots from the South Okanagan are the only place that has that I've seen.
Yeah.
And consistency, and not just our vineyards, others as
It's
well.
called the Heartbreak Grape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because is it a difficult one to grow versus say Merlot or Cab Franc?
It's a difficult one to grow in climates that are difficult to grow grapes at. Yeah.
Okay, where's Andrew Boone when I need him?
Yeah. No, well, it's we are lucky. Anyone that grows Pinot in California as well, pretty lucky.
Yeah.
The thing with Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, any Burgundy grape varieties for that matter, they're typically thinner skinned and they're typically susceptible to molds and botrytis.
Well, they have that small, tight bunch, right?
Yeah, they're just certain vines are just susceptible to it, regardless of the bunch size. So, and so Pinot is one of them. But here in the South Okanagan, we have zero disease pressure. It's not really that hard for us. It's more about finding the right sites that are going to give you more complexity in the wine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have two distinct sites that both contribute, very interesting flavors to it. So, this is kind of stepping back into a bit more that South Okanagan ripe, rich, red fruit, but there's still a lot of complexity with this wine.
Mm-hmm. Pause as we're sniffing it.
Yeah, well, I get sort of some cherry cola, and it's got a little bit of, it's kind of like tobacco-y sort of.
Yeah.
So
French
sweet
oak,
tobacco.
did you say?
Well,
French and
historically,
American?
the Pinots have always gone into old barrels, essentially neutral barrels.
Oh, okay.
It's still 100% aged in oak, but all of that oak is, at least 4 years old, probably roughly 4 to 6 years old.
Yeah.
In 14 and 15, I started flirting with using some second fill barrels and just trying to add a bit more spice to them, but you won't see those for another few years. But yeah, historically, this wine has been neutral so that It's essentially just the terroir and the
Yeah.
sites that you see, and the natural complexity of the grape variety itself is expressed without anything added to it.
So I've got two great questions. Carol wants to know, with a thin skin, does Pinot Noir want to be grown at lower elevations?
Not too sure. Typically, the higher you are on a slope, the more sort of air drainage and wind circulation that you'll get. So somewhere like lower here, essentially on the valley floor, you kind of get more stagnant air, less breezes. I mean, it's always quite breezy here in the Okanagan anyways, but most of the premium Pinot sites that you'll ever see anywhere are on sort of hillsides.
And then the next question is from Elizabeth. She's wondering, is there any, idea of if we did a small lot Pinot Noir clone release, like a small lot case?
This is a small lot production as it is. We do less than 800 cases of the Oldfield Series Pinot. So, we, as a winemaker, it's always interesting to try and, break things down to the smallest sort of fraction of the vineyard or the clone or of everything that you can do. But it ultimately ends up having, is the wine going to be distinct on its own right? So you can go through all that effort and make a clone wine, single clone variety from a single site, and then you made 30 cases of it, but you just turned around and made 800 cases of wine that's way better. Am I comfortable saying, okay, I spent an extra 6 months making something very select and very microscopic, and it's not as good? Am I going to turn and charge 3 times as much for that wine because I put that much more time into it?
But you are doing,
no.
Sandra has given you a little bit of leeway to do some experimental, like you had an orange wine this year, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I make every single block of grapes that we have, every single batch of wine that I make from every single block, I make them as individual wines. So we make 15 different wines here at Tin Horn Creek, but at the end of harvest, I have 80 different wines that I've made. They all essentially get funneled into the 15 different wines.
Do you ever leave one out or change your mind where it's going?
Well, I use those as benchmarks for me. I've only been here for 2 years. I use those as sort of guides as to where in the vineyard am I seeing the best fruit, and how can we identify that and make those sort of selections earlier in the process, so that I can identify essentially our Oldfield Reserve wines earlier to make them better throughout the whole process. So, we've got multiple clones. We have very old vineyards here that are interplanted with different clones. So it's, as we kind of look at our blocks and replant, which we're kind of getting into a lot now with our second generation vineyards, they'll become more homogenized. But historically, one of the first vineyards planted on the Black Sage Bench, it's got some mixture within it naturally, and I think that sort of natural mixture gives a natural complexity to the wine that's always going to be better than a single clone from a single site. I think that, as exciting as that is, and some people might think they can learn something from that. In the 10 years I've been making wine, I've probably learned more that more is better. More broad usage of clones, broad usage of fermentations,
just for that
yeasts.
Complexity.
Yeah, you get more complexity, and you go down to Sonoma, go to a bunch of wineries that do individual cloned wines, and then try their blended wine, which would probably be half the price. I guarantee 9 times out of 10 you'll like the blended wine better than the individual clones, and that's what I've found. Yeah, maybe I'm just cheap and like the cheaper wines, but
you leave those for the wine geeks that want to try it out. Yeah.
So
hopefully that
Marie
answers the
would like
question.
to know, what is the difference between the Oldfield Pinot Noir and the regular Pinot Noir?
The varietal?
Yes.
Yes. When it comes down to just winemaking basics and age, I wasn't around for this vintage, so I can't speak for Sandra. It's too bad she's I'm loving having Terry here, but it'd be always nice to have
Too bad you can't turn and go.
the previous
"What did you do, Sandra?"
understand what happened.
Yeah.
But the main difference is, typically the best barrels were selected, and then they were given an extra year of bottle age, probably a bit more barrel age as well.
So it's fruit selection, barrel selection, aging.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
In 14 and in 15, the Pinots that I've been a part of, typically I make two different Pinots. One of them goes into open top fermenters with about 1.5 ton open top fermenters, and we use a bit more whole cluster. So instead of essentially extracting the berries from the bunches, we put the whole bunch into the bottom of that, and then so the way fermentation works, if you don't break apart the berry and leave the berries intact as whole, they start naturally fermenting inside the berry without actually getting any exposure to air or to yeast or to anything. So they go through what's called carbonic maceration on their own. Plus you have more stems in there as well.
Is that the tannins? Or
there's a whole bunch of things going on. The carbonic maceration provides a really bright, beautiful, concentrated fruity lift, but then you get the tannin component from the stems as well that kind of adds a bit more grip to it. And so you end up changing the profile of the wine. I don't want to say drastically, but it is a different wine. The most drastic thing would be if it was different grapes. And so that's the one that we make. So, and that gets punched down, very traditional Burgundy, no yeast, no nothing. We just literally put it into those things, and then once it starts fermenting, we punch them down.
Explain punching down, because if someone doesn't know punching down,
right,
it looks pretty rudimentary process. They've probably been doing this
2,000 years at least, probably longer, probably 4,000 years. But Pinot Noir production in Burgundy has been going on for 1,000, 1,500 years. This is essentially the same model that they use. So you put the grapes into a vessel. As they start fermenting, carbon dioxide gas is released as the yeast consume the sugars. That pushes the cap, which is essentially grape skins, stems, anything that the gas will attach itself to. So that starts to rise to the surface after a week or 10 days, depending on whether or not you're using natural yeast or selected yeast. And so then what you need to do is punch that cap down below the liquid surface. So in a 1.5 ton fermenter, which is about chest height, half of that height would be the cap, and the other half would just be pure liquid fermenting below. And so twice a day, 3 times a day, you grab essentially a plunger, and you start pushing that cap down to allow not only the cap to cool off because it's hotter because it's full of air, and the fermentation is creating heat, but you get that flavor out of those skins when it's submerged back in.
No, it's labor intensive. I watch people, they're standing on the edge and they're pounding this down.
I hire very strong people to do that part. And so that's about half of the Pinot that we make. The other half would be a bit more conventional. They go into a larger format tank, and but again, still some whole cluster, and then we pump those over. And so those end up being much more fruity, and so they all go to different barrel lots, and then essentially I just pick the best assemblage of those two groups together. And so for the 14s, it ended up being 80% of the open top traditional method and about 20% of that fruity component.
And that went into
the best one. And that went into the Oldfield series, which went into slightly newer barrels, which is still in barrel now. And then the rest of it went into bottle in January.
So we have another great question came through that says, will a wine always open to more complexity?
How long? Like over the evening?
I don't know if I could ever have it last that long.
That's a difficult question. In terms of Pinot Noir, I'd say the older Pinot gets, usually the more complex it gets. I think that's part of the reason why our program is as long as it is. Because when any red wine is really young, as with our rosé, they're very fruit driven. I don't want to call them more simple, but they're very fresh and vibrant, and to a lot of people, that's the style that they love. You know,
Yeah.
most people, 99% of the people that buy our wines, they're drinking them within a day. There's not too many people that are going to give them time to go.
So they're saying like when you're pouring it for dinner and you let it open?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And then another
Yeah.
great question that came through was, is it the taste of the grape that decides which format you'll use? So when you're doing like your open top ferments and things like that,
Absolutely.
that's what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, in the
Yeah.
two vintages I've been here at Tinhorn, in 2014, there was definitely, even in the first year, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different Pinot Noir blocks. It was pretty easy for me to identify what my favorite block was in 2014. But again, you never count out your sensory in the vineyard when you're walking around tasting grapes. It is the most important part of the whole process. Calling your picks is, again, all that stuff. Finding the right grapes and calling your harvest is way more important than playing around with fermentations and open tops and clusters and that kind of stuff. Those are the critical decisions that
It's what comes out of the vineyard.
and it literally happens in a second. You're like, okay, let's pick it. And so boom, the decision's made. That wine is now going to be 4 years in the making. The most important thing that you've done is grow the grapes up to that point, but then call the pick. So
Wow.
easy
So,
job.
Stuart has a great question. Do people aerate or decant whites, or is it just
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's not common, but there's certainly a lot of white wine. I would say our 15 Gewürztraminer, if you're going to drink it now, I'd decant that wine.
Yep.
There's a lot of wines that need some air.
Like the old Field Series Chardonnay, would you decant? Or is it just so delicious you wouldn't worry about
I
it?
don't know if that one needs it
Yeah.
because that wine has spent 16, 17 months in barrel, 3 months in bottle. So it's probably the one that you could.
Yeah.
You could, but it's been given enough time that I would say maybe not. I've never decanted it, so I can't.
So why would you decant a white wine, and how would you know if a white should be decanted or aerated?
By variety is usually the first thing that you would look at. There's a lot of white varieties that not necessarily French varieties, not necessarily varieties that we grow here in the Okanagan with regularity. That's not true there. Some of them are French. So things, I just look back to my experiences working in the Rhone, tasting wines at, Chauve, and he'd open up a 30-year-old white Rhone from Hermitage and he'd decant that hours later and it's.
So maybe an
So
older
good.
wine.
There's no real rules. I think if the wine doesn't look how you want it to look,
We better
decant it.
keep moving here.
We're running out of time.
We have 2 more wines.
It might be 10 minutes up.
Okay,
Just
so
saying.
this is the first red of your vintage, right? The
The
2014
14
Merlot.
vintage was my first one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We're
So
having an Andrew
better-
Windsor Merlot.
Better be good.
Yeah, man, pressure's on, right? Yeah.
Pressure's always on.
Now, again, the Merlot is wonderful to age, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a wonderful wine to drink young, but it's also a wonderful wine to drink.
I see them looking for tastes over there.
Can we do the camera? Can you show the people?
Show the people first, Shalane, before you
Yeah,
drink
there you
it.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a really good wine to drink young, but also ages really, really well. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people look at these wines that are very fruity, very soft. We're like, no way this can sell her. But
yeah.
we look back at pretty much every Merlot that Tinhorn's ever made. They all still drink well. It depends on whether or not you're willing to drink a wine that's slightly brick red to brown and still tasting good. I mean,
I never said no to a wine, really.
that's why we're in this business.
That's
Terry.
why we're in this business, yeah.
So the
Yeah.
14 Merlot, again, I've said it before, the 14 vintage from my perspective has been going to be pretty hard to beat. This wine was just bottled, 2 weeks ago. So if you did get it in your case, I don't want to say don't drink it now because it does drink well now, but by July, August, it will have sort of settled down a little bit from the bottling process. But but it's really rich and ripe and lots of cola berry.
Chew on this one.
Yeah, it's a bit
Yeah.
more guts.
Yeah, no, it's
Oh, that's
good.
really nice.
It's really nice, yeah. Well, we still have the 13 Merlot, so this is just really out to club members again.
Yeah.
Again, so it's like the first release goes out to the wine club, and then when
When we,
the 13 is out, then
yeah, well, I
14
think it's
rolls
all.
in.
It
Yeah.
will be probably late summer when this is released, which is perfect because it's
Yeah.
when it should be. So us marketing salespeople have this whole thing figured out, right? Should we drink it now?
Who do we look after? We look
It's
after the wine club
It's
first.
the wine
Yeah,
club.
yeah,
They
yeah.
They do. But if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have bottled this. Yeah, I'd be delayed on everything else. So thank you for keeping me on schedule.
Yeah, we were saying, hey, about the boxes we're packing next week, right? Yeah. Well, they're actually, that's the interesting part about the wine industry, because you do have the balance of art, creativity, agriculture, marketing, sales, hospitality, accounting,
Pleasure. Just
Pleasure.
thinking, yeah.
yeah, food pairing. It's a very complex industry.
Well, that's the most elaborate.
For me,
That's
it's
the
a
most
very complex
This
industry.
was elaborate.
For Andrew, evidently
version
it's not.
of a wine business explanation I've ever heard. So cheers to you, Terry.
Thank you.
Does
Thank you.
require all of these things
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
the wine in the glass. And
There's a lot that went behind it. To get
There-
that little wine
there is,
in
there
the
is.
glass and in your home. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So what do you taste here, Terry?
Elderberry?
Can I have some more? You
Uh,
taking it all?
Well, I love the fruit in this right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like-
kind of funny that you said that because I had 3 different people say chug, chug to me. So it's
Oh.
quite funny. But
Mm.
I'm trying
Yeah.
not to.
It's got great structure. Like I would want to age this a little longer.
I think
Yeah.
I think this
Yeah.
one's not
Yeah.
quite as lush as some of the previous vintages have been. It's a bit more oak, it seems.
Yeah, a little tannic. Yeah.
But I think it's more about the type of oak. This wine sees a little bit of Hungarian oak, which is new in this vintage.
Hungarian oak. Wow.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's typically gives it a bit more structure.
Yeah.
Which will allow it to sort of age. a bit
Really
more.
long finish.
Yeah.
Like really long finish. Love that.
So Elaine and David asked, how many Crush Club members do we have?
Lots.
Lots and lots and lots.
Yeah. Lots and lots. The club started in 2005, so it was the very first one in the valley, and we are now close to 3,000 members. I think 3,000. Yeah. So
Just a few.
just a few. Yeah.
So a
Well-
question about the Merlot
Sure.
is, if you said to wait until July-ish, but if we can hold off, when will it really be at its peak, do you think?
Ooh,
Mm.
I don't want to say too late because then you won't buy more.
Oh, sales and marketing just
But
hit.
It's a catch-22.
no, I would say this wine by Thanksgiving, by Christmas will be rocking.
Yeah.
I like to have this wine in bottle for probably 6 months before I start really getting into it on a regular basis, which I think puts us somewhere around October, November.
We better get this last one in.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of my favorites. Oldfield Series Cabernet Franc.
It's always
Yeah.
another winner.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And so this is again 100% Cab Franc. Oldfield's has been 100% Cab Franc for a few vintages now. And this is
And again, this is the 13.
13.
Yeah, this is 13. Wow.
Yeah.
So
That's
again,
our 3rd vintage of that one,
Yeah.
correct?
so there was a 2010, but not an 11, and then a 12 and a 13. Yeah. So again, same differences that we talked about between Pinot Noir, varietal, and Oldfield
Well,
Series.
the Bordeaux varieties are typically dealt with a little bit differently than Pinot and Burgundy
Yeah.
varieties. Cab Franc in particular would have been, essentially all put into larger format tanks, and Montage, so just pump overs, which is again very, very common for these varieties. I know historically Sandra used to like to press the barrels off, press the wine off earlier before the fermentation was completed. So probably somewhere around 10% alcohol with, roughly 30, 40 grams of sugar left. And then she'd put them directly to new French oak and let them finish fermentation in barrels. So, which is a common winemaking process, certainly in places like Australia and in California, where Sandra's from. And so, and definitely, places I've done that as well. And to me, that always amplifies the fruit side of the wines. They come off of the skins and they're very fresh and very fruity and vibrant. They go into these barrels and they're essentially mixing themselves. So they tend to extract some oak pretty quickly, but by doing that, the oak has a lot more time to age and become a bit more nuanced and show some complexity. And so these wines are in barrel for about 16 months, all French, probably 30%-ish new, whereas the Pinot was 0% new French oak. So you get much more spice and much more intensity of tannin and
that's so delicious.
more longevity. These wines are absolutely gorgeous.
This is a great pairing wine. I love this one.
So if we went with the question of what's the big difference between the Oldfield Series Pinot Noir and the Varietal Merlot, what's the big difference between the Oldfield Merlot Cabernet Franc and the Varietal Cabernet Franc? I'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
I'm just
We're the
stuttering.
ones drinking. I don't know what happened to it.
So historically, most of the Varietal Series wines have been predominantly American oak, and just a little bit less aging. And so, you would see probably 12 to 16 months of the Varietal Series in barrel and then released before it's 2 years old. Whereas the Oldfield Series would be exclusively French oak, and then age for 16 to 18 months, and then again 16 to 18 months in bottle, so 3 years old at release as well. So stylistically, those have been how they've been made differently.
Again, fruit selection. Would you have a certain fruit come in? They go, yeah, that's definitely going in the Oldfield Series.
I wasn't there, but
sorry.
I'm thinking that's how. They were.
Did I jump too fast? Or,
Well, like I said, since 14, I keep everything as individual blocks, and then the best block wins at the end of the day and goes into the Oldfield Series.
Okay.
Before that, maybe they've been the same way. Sandra's been making wine here for about 20 years, so I'm sure the process has changed from,
So just one last question, because unfortunately it's almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
But is there really a taste difference between French and Hungarian and American oak?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hope you come down to the winery. We're going to be doing some tours and things like that will show you teach you about barrels. And it's kind of a new program that we're doing this year. Just Transola, who's sitting behind me yesterday. So
they can come and actually do tastings from different barrels.
They can do a private, well, not directly from the barrels because it gets a bit complicated doing it that way. But if you do a private tasting here, you're going to learn a lot about oak and a lot about the barrel program and how it's changing and how it's evolving. But they're significantly different, all three of those origins. But
if you had to pick one word that described Hungarian, one for American, one for French, just a characteristic.
Are we talking about white wines or red wines?
Oh, I just said one word.
See, it's not that easy, Terry. If it was that easy,
I kind of.
Then I would have had to spend.
Okay, if it was a cartoon character, would it be?
Yeah, I would say American oak is very very attractive for young released wines. It's very I don't know, it's sexy, but it is.
Yeah.
It's very lush, and it really imparts a really kind of vanilla, coconutty, but not a structured, not much tannin. When you're looking at barrels, I'm going to elaborate.
I know there's a million.
We're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
But when you look at barrels, you're looking for flavor and structure, so tannin and structural support for the wines. American oak gives you more flavor, less structure. Hungarian oak kind of gives you more structure and still some flavor, whereas French oak, again, very general here, kind of gives you a bit more nuance. I would say middle of the road structure
Yeah.
and middle of the road flavor, depending on how long you leave it in the barrel. So if that answers the question, I'd be shocked. But
Well, it's a huge decision to know which barrel and how long, and you can,
totally.
right?
So
Yeah.
after tasting
That's
every
why you
month-
had to go to university.
No, that's why. That's why you just keep tasting the
Tasting it?
barrels.
Yeah, we did. Are we out of time? You're
We're out
giving
of
me that
time.
look.
Oh.
You're giving me
We
that
are.
look.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
We didn't do the second poll.
No, I told you we wouldn't have time for 2 polls today because we
Rambled
had
too
6
long,
lines. But I did make a note to everybody that if they have any more questions for us, just to shoot you or I an email,
Perfect.
crashclub@tinhorn.com, because we weren't able to get to all of them tonight.
That was a great walkthrough. Thank you. Thanks,
Glad
Andrew.
that-
Yeah,
glad it was
yeah.
educational.
We're
right.
delighted to have Andrew here with us. And coming up June 10th, we're actually going to be with Sandra. She's going to take a look at sustainability and what we're doing here at Tin Horn Creek, some of the new measures, what we've done very successfully, and also discuss with you what you would like to see and get your feedback too. So that here you can auto subscribe to that. So we'd love to see you there. Okay. Anyway, any questions, send us a note, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Cheers.
Have a good night.
Say cheers.
And Michelle.
Cheers.
The long drawn out cheers.